The world of NHL prospects is very deep and very vast. You have the guys who have been drafted like Trevor Zegras, Cole Caulfield, Dylan Cousins, who make headlines night in and night out. You also have the guys who are yet to be drafted, like Lafreniere, Byfield, Raymond, etc. And among these players you have the goaltenders, the ones whose NHL futures are the least predictable, the most unexplainable, and overall, the ones that can just come out of nowhere. The guys we talk about all the time are Yaroslav Askarov, who is yet to be drafted, Spencer Knight, who was taken in the most previous draft, some older goalies like Michael DiPietro, Connor Ingram, and Cayden Primeau. But in this video, we're going to be talking about not one, but two potentially elite goaltender prospects that nobody talks about, that I don't see anybody bringing up on any hype trains whatsoever, and who have just put up better 19, 20-year-old seasons than TUUKKA RASK in the Finnish Liga. TUUKKA RASK, by the way, is the guy who most likely would have won the Vezina this season had the season not been on hold. Behold, let's talk today about Justus Annunen and Lukas Dostal. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start off with where these two players were drafted, how old they are, and where they're playing. Justus Annunen was a guy who was drafted in the third round of the 2018 NHL Entry Draft, 64th overall by the Colorado Avalanche. He was born March 11th in the year 2000 and currently is a 6'4", 207-pound goaltender. Lukas Dostal is a guy who was drafted literally 21 picks after in the same third round of the same 2018 entry draft. He was drafted by the Ducks and born on June 22nd, 2000. He's a 6'1", 168-pound netminder, which means that he's in the same age category as Justus Annunen. The main difference between these two players is that Annunen is a Finn and Dostal is a Czech. When they were drafted, they were both playing in their own country's respective U20 leagues. Annunen playing in the Junior ASM Liga and Dostal playing in the Czech U20 league primarily, and then eventually graduating to the second Pro Czech league. They were both pretty good. And later on in their careers after being drafted, they would put on stellar World Junior performances. Lukas Dostal is a guy who, for the Czech Republic at last year's World Juniors, had the best save percentage out of every goaltender with a .957 in 4 games played. At this most previous World Juniors, though, Justus Annunen had a .921 save percentage in 6 games played, and he was named as a top 3 player on Team Finland. Now that's all fine and dandy. Tournaments are a good way to gauge how good players are in playing against their own age range. But in normal league play, how do these two fare? And why do I say that they're better than TUUKKA RASK was? Well, it's because just this season, Lukas Dostal was moved from the Czech Republic League over to the Liga, and he played his entire year so far with the Ilves team in Finland. Justus Annunen graduated up and he played with Karpat of the Liga this season. Now here's the kicker. These two guys started the season off at 19 years of age. Annunen just recently turned 20, and Dostal is turning 20 later in June. This season, for the Karpat hockey team in the Liga, Justus Annunen played 23 games, and he had a .177 goals against average and a .929 save percentage. That's not all, though. Lukas Dostal, also as a 19-year-old, played with the Ilves 43 games played, a .178 goals against average, and a .928 save percentage. If we go to the entire SM Liga this season and we take a look at the goaltending stats, Justus Annunen was tied with Michael Gartieg for first in the league in save percentage. 0.001% behind was Lukas Dostal in third place. And in terms of the goals against average, Dostal and Annunen are 1 and 2. These two guys were the best goaltenders in Finland. As 19 turning 20-year-olds, Annunen, the homegrown Finnish talent, and Dostal, the loaned player from the Czech Republic. These two guys just had historically amazing 19-year-old years. So much to the fact that if we compare these two guys with the rest of the Liga's goaltending history, we can see a short list of players who were better statistically speaking. Kari Lehtonen and Antero Niinimäki were the only two goaltenders in Liga history to have a U20 season better than Justus Annunen's this year. Go down a few more names, you have a few other 929s, UC Saros is in here, Kari Ramo is in here, and Lukas Dostal is 7th on this list, tied with Kari Lehtonen and tied with TUUKKA RASK. These two TUUKKA RASK years, in 2006-2007 and 2005-2006, were when TUUKKA RASK was 19 and 18 years old respectively. TUUKKA RASK's 19-year-old year, 2006-2007, saw him getting a .928 save percentage and a .238 goals against average. Out of these group of players, TUUKKA RASK is the worst one here. Dostal and Annunen had better save percentages and better goals against averages. Well, Dostal actually had a tied save percentage with his 19-year-old year than TUUKKA RASK did, but the difference between Dostal and Annunen is literally .001, so I think it's negligible, the difference here. The big kicker, though, is that goals against average. TUUKKA RASK was at a 2.38 goals against average when he was 19, Dostal a 1.78, and Annunen a 1.77. Obviously, goals against average isn't the best goaltending stat to rely on because it does kind of depict the team in front of them a little bit more. But at the same time, it is noteworthy that Annunen was playing on Karpat, which was the best team in the Liga this season. Dostal was playing on an Ilves team that was 4th best in the league this season. And when TUUKKA RASK played in the Finnish Liga back then, he was playing on a team that was below average. So that indeed is another point to consider in this discussion as well. However, you can't use that as your entire argument to discredit how these guys have been performing. Now for the scouting report part of this. I reached out to Dobber Prospects' Keith Freeze, a good friend of mine, fellow wrestling fan, and a very good follow on Twitter, about these two players and tried to get a little bit of insight as to how they played. This is what Keith Freeze said. Dostal is a very athletic goaltender and a solid skater. He likes to keep the play moving either by playing the puck behind his own net or passing it up the ice himself. But his athleticism draws him into bad decisions sometimes. Dostal gets caught and then he has to jump all over the crease just to save himself. Personally, I love his style. It's fun to watch. But as one of his teammates, I'd probably hate it, in terms of knowing where he'll be and thus where I would need to be. Those nuances are really what makes the defense run effectively, and that's why Annunen is probably the more sound goaltender. Annunen's movements are calculated, and he squares up his frame to absorb the shot, rather than Dostal, who kind of plays like a soccer goalie leaping from post to post. It's really a matter of the style of play you want your goaltender to be, but I'll put it like this. Annunen is your typical stay-at-home goalie, whereas Dostal plays as much in the way of Kelly Hrudey. Personally, I find Dostal to be more fun to watch, but in the long run, Annunen's poise and positioning is probably more calming on a game-to-game basis. As a result, it's easier to see why Annunen's save percentage and goals against average were just a tad bit better than Dostal's, but at the same time, with Dostal being the way he is, where he's able to flop around the ice left, right, and center, jumping out at pucks and being an athletic freak, it's really interesting to explore the idea of how good he can actually be if he just calmed his game down a little bit. So I'll leave you with this. With the information I presented in this video, do you think Annunen and Dostal are two goaltending prospects that don't get enough recognition? You talk about goaltender prospects, you talk about Cayden Primeau, DiPietro, Dan Vladaj, and a few other guys. These guys are never in that conversation. So answer down in the comments below. Do they deserve to be? Because I think they do. I hope you enjoyed this video. Social Dive Trost 99, and bye.